Welcome to Baptized and Clueless. I'm your host, you,
And I'm your host, Wes.
a podcast where we unravel the misconceptions that can make your spiritual journey feel overwhelming.
We know that stumbling and falling are a part of the process, and we're here to embrace that vulnerability together.
Let's get the show started. Hello once again, everyone, and thank you for joining us. We're here with a special guest. He's known to both Wesley and I. His name is Key, and he's going to let us know a little bit more about himself as well. And we're going to dive into his initial walk with the Lord as well, and just, the experiences that he had. So, Key, why don't you let the people know a little bit about yourself?
I appreciate, first of all, I appreciate you guys having me on this wonderful podcast. Wes, Yusuf, you guys are my brothers, so it'll be an honor to share my story with you guys, and hopefully it inspires others as well. For me, I grew up with immigrant parents. They're both from Trinidad and Tobago. I grew up with my mom, my dad, and my brother. And ever since I can really remember, my earliest memories are being in a church. My mom and my dad, when they moved, or, when I was born, we lived in Pomona, Diamond Bar area, and we went to a church called Lifeway Church. And Lifeway Church, I was like 5 years old, and I was a part of the Jesus Rangers.
How do you remember the name of the church at 5? I don't remember the name of my church.
You don't remember it? Nah, it's like I have a pretty good memory about stuff like that, and I'm a sentimental person. So like I remember this kind of stuff. Like I drive by the church still, sometimes it's just being like, dang, like, yeah, I remember when I was walking those streets. It's a little jit, just going around. But it was I was a Jesus Ranger. My very first friends, Chris and Justin, those are my two very first friends, and I still talk to them today. We're in different times in our life. We've separated, we've come back together. Some of us spend more time with one than the other, like one moved, and all this kind of stuff that we got. But thankfully, social media keeps people together nowadays. So
technology.
That's kind of where I started. But I was like any other church kid. Like I just went because my parents told me. You know what I mean? Like I was like, what else am I gonna do? I'm not old enough to stay at home. My brother's going. I gotta go. That's just what happened. And it was I pretty much grown up in like non-denominational churches. This one was probably like more closer to like a I guess like I may be incorrect in the types of churches, so I don't want to get that wrong. But I feel like it's
Pentecostal.
Yeah, it's probably a Pentecostal. Probably, it's something along those lines. They had like the long pews and everything, and it's black people and all that kind of stuff. So, but it was cool. It was cool and Hispanic. Because Pomona has a big Hispanic community. But it was cool. I just grew up regular, and like I was the type of Christian that, I go to church on Sunday and I pray for my food and, I might say a prayer before I go to sleep, maybe if my mom tells me, and that's how I live my life. The rest of the stuff was in the world. I think that's a pretty regular Christian story for a lot of folks in America.
Yeah.
So how long were you in Trinidad before you moved up?
No, so I was born in California.
Okay.
Yeah, I was not born in Trinidad. I wish. My brother was close. He was about like 6 months too late when my mom was over here and stuff. So, but he spent a lot of his early years, because my grandmother was still alive at that time, and she insisted that he stays down in Trinidad for long periods of time. So he was there like every year, like maybe 6 months out of the year for his first 3 years.
That's the norm. My wife's from Trinidad. Same thing happened to her and her brothers.
Yeah. It's a thing, they want to keep everybody close to family, and like, it's just a culture thing. And, I think that affected me because when I was born 7 years later, my grandmother, she was diagnosed with leukemia, and she ended up passing away 3 months before I was born.
Oh, wow.
So, when the matriarch of a family goes away, some of the traditions and things like that kind of go away too. So, my mom, I was raised like wholeheartedly here in California, and I think part of that kind of informed my search for identity though, because I realized quickly that I didn't have the same type of upbringing as like other Black Americans that are here in America.
Yeah.
And my parents, in Trinidad and just in other Caribbean countries, Yusuf, like it's more about, it's not really a race thing, because everyone has so much pride in the country regardless of what you look like.
Exactly.
But it's more of a class thing, right?
Yes.
So it's like a class issue. So when I came here, that was really what, like my like racism wasn't something that I was taught really growing up to look out for, but it was just something that I experienced because I don't have an accent. So to everyone else, I was just a little Black kid running around, but like my mind isn't really tuned for that. You know what I mean? Right. So I was friends with everybody. I was trying to be friends with everybody. I was welcoming, that real Caribbean culture, welcome, hospitality. Like that's what I grew up on. That's what my parents taught me. And so, I really had to wrestle and battle with that. And I think throughout my life, it was really trying to figure out my identity. What are the things that make me me? And I think my spiritual walk lent to that really well as well, because, I thought I was doing everything I needed to do. I believed in Jesus. I was like, yeah, he saved us, and I want to be a good person. And, I'm going to go to church on Sundays, even though, let's be real, like I wasn't actively paying attention, trying to like learn the scriptures and all this stuff. I just felt like I was doing my job because I was there.
So Key, let me ask you this then. So how old were you when you decided to make that intentional decision?
Bro, I was 20, probably around 27, 28 is when I wanted to make because when you grow up in that environment where your parents are taking you to church, and it was great. Like I had friends at church, like I participated, but it was just that, like on Sundays, right? And my dad was an usher. And then somewhere around sophomore year of high school, I cared more about girls in the world and things like that than church. And I was like, I'm not relating with what you guys are doing here. I'm in this young adults class. I don't go to the main service, but in the young adults, I'm only looking at the girls, or I'm only trying to talk with the homies or whatever it is. And so I was just like, I'm cool. I'm going to figure this stuff out. I got enough of it in me. That's what I felt. And I think that, the Bible talks about people being rich in spirit. I felt that I was rich in spirit. And like, you're not supposed to be like that, where you think you're too saved or you're too good, because then that's where arrogance and pride is bred. And that's what Satan uses. You know what I mean? So, I think Satan, I can admit this. I think Satan had his way with me at that time. He was like, yeah, you don't like this. You're not putting your all into this. Just go away from this. You have enough.
Was there anything that was discouraging you?
No, I don't think it was like, I don't think it's like a discouragement from a place of like, oh, you shouldn't be there. Oh, you shouldn't do this. It's reverse. It's like, oh, you're good enough. Like you know enough. You're good enough. You believe in Jesus. Go out into the world. You'll be fine. You can handle it. And that's what I did. And, and I ended up joining with the world. So, started smoking, drinking, partying, just doing regular world stuff. And like, it doesn't necessarily have to be so like debaucherous or crazy, but just natural world things. I cared about money. I cared about status. I cared about success. I didn't really love on people the way that I was supposed to. I became very transactional in my relationships, all of these different things. And, I thought it was okay, or it was cool because I saw other people do it and get successful. And I felt that I was a good enough person that like I can do some good in the world if I had these things, or if I pursued it this way. And all of my 20s was like that until, some years pass and you realize I'm still not happy. I still don't know myself. I still don't have an identity. Like I thought that this was just going to take time, but time is passing, and I've ruined relationships, and I've lied, and I've made bad decisions, and I feel bad about things, and I have regrets, and I have all this stuff, and I'm trying to fill it. I'm trying to fill that Jesus-sized heart with all kinds of other things.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a story for a lot of people. Yeah, definitely.
And so, I think all of us get to a point where we like to, I don't want to say it's rock bottom, but you start, self-evaluating. And I wasn't mature enough to self-evaluate until I was around 27, 28. And it happened almost like in a flash. You just kind of wake up one day and you're like, I'm not happy.
You're tired of it.
I'm tired of this.
Yeah.
I'm tired. I'm tired of having to do this every single day.
But Key, isn't that kind of a rock bottom though? When we got to the point where we're just depleted. It's not that life is gone. It's not like life's gone off the railing, but emotionally and directionally, you're just like at your lowest
depleted.
point. Yeah.
Yeah. I was depleted, man. So I needed something. And, the first thing I turned to were books, because I wasn't a reader like that, so I was like, okay, I need to get more information, new sources of information. And this is the social media age, internet age. This is before real like disinformation was put out. Yeah. So like people were actually trying to help each other by giving information out, and websites and things like that. So I just started looking and looking for books and looking for ways to change. And I came across this book that is called "What to Say When You Talk to Yourself," and it's by a doctor. I believe it's Shad Helmsetter. I could be incorrect on that, so don't quote me on that, y'all. But a little Amazon search, you'll get to it. But I read this book. And it was all about, I realized I had such negative self-talk.
Yes. Wow.
Negative self-talk. I would tell myself, you don't deserve this. You're not really worthy of this. And then that would make me, it was weird because it was like a sick obsession where that would make me grateful for like the small things and the small blessings that would happen. Yeah. But I wouldn't really acknowledge it as that. I would just be like, well, at least I get this. You know what I mean? Like that's a different heart posture. Where it's like, I'm just grateful to be here instead of really standing in this space because I know that I deserve it. I was more of just like, hey, I'm just grateful to be here because I think so low of myself because of whatever decisions that I made, that I'm just trying to be as nice as I can be in my little space in what I have here. Yeah. And that's just, that just goes to show how much, it took its toll. So, I started reading that book, and actually in reading that book, there was a few examples that helped me in quitting smoking marijuana. So I was smoking weed, and we're out in California, like, come on now, you know what I mean? You grow up your whole life with that being an identity of being from here, but again, it goes back to the identity. I'm like, hey, I'm from California, I should probably be smoking weed. That's part of being from here, right? And so, the underlying thread is this search for identity that I've had my entire life. What are the things that make me who I am? And so I read that book, and in reading that book, it helped me stop smoking and it helped me quit pornography.
So stop right there for a second. Can I ask you, were those your biggest changes that you had to endure in the beginning of your walk?
Those were the ones that I could identify.
Yeah.
Because they were actionable things that I was doing. Right. There's a lot of emotional work because you realize that those two things aren't the cause, it's the effect.
It's the effect, exactly.
So I started out with the effect. I was like, well, I got but I didn't realize that they were an effect because I hadn't gone through therapy at that time. I hadn't talked through my feelings, none of that. I just knew, hey, I'm doing this and I'm doing this, and these two things seem to tire me out or get my brain thinking in a way that I don't want it to think. So let me address these two things.
Let's grapple that for a second, because you said it perfectly. I've said it before in our groups. We both, all three of us belong to two groups that deal with a lot of things for men. And what you touched on is definitely the thing that everyone goes to. They go to the effect. instead of going for the roots. And I mean, I get it because the effect is the first thing you get to see. So it's obvious that, smoke is not something you want to do to your body, but the why you smoke.
Exactly.
Or why you go to porn, or why you're a serial dater.
Exactly.
Right. So that's really good.
Yeah. Serial dating. Oh man, that was your boy.
Yeah.
Man, as soon as I heard the spice of life is variety, I took that and ran with it. You know what I mean? I was like, okay, for sure.
Yeah.
Variety. I want all of them, And again, it's another effect. It's like, okay, well, what is causing me to feel this way? What am I searching for? And I realized, I was searching for identity. I was trying to find myself in the people that I was with, the relationships that I had. I took things and observed things and noticed things within those types of people because there were a variety of different people, a variety of different circumstances.
Yes.
And I would add that on to me.
And did you kind of get lost in their problems too, and get lost in their issues?
Absolutely. It's so funny. I used to help people with their issues, like when I was like in 5th grade. Like I didn't even know what I was doing, but I cared about people's like issues and stuff. I'd be giving advice in like 4th grade, bro. At recess. At recess, I'm telling Amanda how to, get back to be friends with Christina at recess, bro.
No,
like it was.
Did you do this for candy? At least, or was it for free?
Nah, I did it for free.
Man,
but
you never survived.
But like, I'd be spitting game at the same time. It's completely, no ethics involved at all, bro. But I thought, hey, this is an even trade. Like, I might get a kiss on the cheek, and I might save your friendship. You know what I mean? We're good.
But that shows gratification as well, right? Getting immediate gratification for doing something with somebody.
Absolutely. And this is, we were just getting into the microwave age, of instant gratification. We didn't know, really like how dangerous and how damaging that was. And, I was doing it around like when I wasn't with my parents. So like, it wasn't like that they can spot that and say, hey, counter it with some discipline and counter it with like some things that they asked me to do that required me to be disciplined. As I look back on my life, I ran away from those types of things because I wanted instant gratification. Right.
That's the flesh.
That's the flesh. That's the flesh. Everything points back to the flesh.
Always the flesh.
Yeah. Always, man. And I realized that the flesh was leading my life. And so once I was successful in quitting smoking and quitting porn, and I just gotten into a new relationship, I really felt empowered and felt like, okay, I think I got a handle on this thing. And, the next level was the why was I doing those things? And that was something that I wasn't ready to address at all.
That's a tough one.
It was,
Because that's one that cuts deep, right?
It is. I realized I was like, oh, I'm not as vulnerable as I thought I was.
Yeah.
I'm not as emotionally intelligent as I thought I was. And I was still masking everything. I was still trying to be something. I was still searching for an identity, and I didn't let the people in my life know about this, especially the women that I dated. And so seemingly to them, things fell apart out of nowhere, but to me, they've been falling apart.
Yeah.
Yeah. They had been falling apart, and I didn't share it, and I didn't express it, and I didn't try and fix it, and all of these things. So
do you think that was out of fear, or out of a fear of being judged, or just out of fear of the unknown? Like,
yeah, I think it's a fear of being judged. I thought maybe like at my big age, like I should have had it figured out, and I just felt like, oh, you're gonna leave me. People are gonna leave me in my life if they don't know that I'm like secure and sure of who I am as an individual, or if they find out that who I am with them isn't who I am with other people, like which one of me are they going to be okay with? All of those things, it gets tricky, especially the longer you wait, and I think that a lot of older adults, like maybe 35 and up, if they haven't addressed some of these things or had some of these conversations, they just kind of get set in their ways. That's where set in their ways comes from.
Oh, definitely.
You know,
definitely.
And they don't want to learn, and they don't want to grow, and they don't want to address the hard things. So,
worse if they're Caribbean.
Yeah. Yes. Oh my gosh, bro. You telling me, man. I try and have some conversations with some of my uncles and elders, and
not happening.
It's not happening. It's not happening at all.
So Kieran, can I ask you, I know you didn't mention this, but like community, being in community, how do you think being in community has helped you resolve these issues that you're talking about?
Man, community saved my life. Community saved my life. Community was something I didn't know that I needed, because, well, see, like once you go through the process of not knowing your identity or not being confident in who you are as an individual, you feel very alone. A lot of solitude, a lot of loneliness that comes from that.
Yeah.
You're in your head a lot. And, as things were falling apart for me, I was also peeling back layers and discovering more about myself. And I started praying to God for community. I was just asking about it because, and this is even before I get into the Bible and like know verses and I'm reading stuff. Like, I just know what I've learned on Sunday services. I didn't even have a church at this time, nothing. I'm just trying to get myself back in shape, and so I finally went to therapy, and that is the best thing that you could ever do. And I highly advise like doing it before you hit rock bottom. Sometimes you need to hit rock bottom before you do it, but
to accept that you need it.
Yeah. But if you have enough wherewithal and self-awareness to say, hey, I can get better and I don't know everything like in my brain, then obviously, I think therapy is the way to go. So, I went to therapy and I was just talking things out, and I started learning about certain complexes that I had and certain habits. And, I realized I wasn't good at setting boundaries. And, I started learning that I was afraid of rejection, and that I was afraid of judgment, and that, I would purposely do things ahead of time to prevent hurt and pain from occurring when, those were potential catalysts for change, and I'm over here looking for a change. And it's like, well, if you don't feel this pain, then how are you supposed to change? What's going to motivate you to do that?
The avoidance. Yeah. That's so true.
The avoidance, I was an avoidant. And it's still something that I have to deal with today, because, if you think about it, we're talking 27, 28, 29, 30 that all this is going on. And I've already had 25 plus years. Well, not really, because you're a baby, but like, at least like 10, 15 years of me in a certain habit, thinking a certain way. And so now I'm 4 years removed from that thinking at this time. The therapy, and learning a little bit about myself, I felt confident to present myself to the world again. And so that's when I started praying for community. And I was just asking God, like, please surround me with other believers, because through my therapy, I realized that I wasn't feeling comfortable talking to people because I was surrounded by a lot of people who didn't have a relationship with God.
Right.
Did your therapist, by any chance? What's up?
Did your therapist have a relationship with God, or?
She did. She did. Wonderful. Now, I didn't seek out a Christian therapist, but through our communication, she did share with me that she believed in God. And so it made me feel comfortable, because when I was talking about hearing something in your spirit, or, a little voice in my head, or she was able to relate and understand, which was great. I think that, controversially, I think that people should get a therapist. Like, if they're getting their first therapist, they should get somebody who is close to how they believe currently.
Yeah, faith-based.
And if it's faith-based, or if they believe in something else, like, get a therapist that's there, because the point isn't like you're going to change, right? And you're going to get another therapist. but you want to meet with somebody who you aren't going to feel like you're going to be judged.
Right, where you can open up.
Where you can open up. So if you're currently in a place where you're like, you know, you don't believe in anything, I wouldn't suggest getting a faith-based therapist, because you're going to have preconceived notions about how that relationship is going to go and how she's judging you or how he's judging you or whatever it is, and you won't actually open up. You need to be with somebody who is going to understand how you're thinking currently.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so she suggested that I need to be surrounded by people. After I was telling her about my relationship, she was like, you don't have any friends, any close friends that know you that also believe in God and walk, you know, trying to live this life out in the right way. And I really realized, I was like, you know, me and my homies, we don't really talk about that too much, or I'm the one, you know, like they look to me as the Christian guy of the group, you know.
Did that bother you?
And I'm not even living my life the way that I really need to, so I'm being a bad example to them, but they know enough about me to know that that's something that is important to me. You know, I put it in my music, I put it, you know, when I talk with people, I don't have a problem talking about my faith, but am I really living it out? And at this point in my time,
was that a problem for you with your friends as far as being the one? Did it feel heavy? Was that a weight?
No, actually, it felt great.
Okay.
It served my identity crisis.
True. Very true.
It served me well, because I was the one that they went to when things got beyond them being able to bear it.
Right.
And because I had a little bit of the word in me, I can say something or give them something or pray for them that provided them with temporary relief.
Okay.
So it was actually a good spot for me to be in, but I wasn't actually being the best Christian that I could be. So once she told me that I needed to be surrounded by people who were like that, in my mind, I was like, man, all the homies I'm with, they've been my day ones. Like, I'm about to make new friends. Like, how long is this really going to take? But, you know, I didn't have a home church. I didn't know where to look. You know, this COVID time on top of that, you know, like we're not even, you know, we're talking about entering into COVID time when this is happening. So I'm stuck in the crib, you know?
Yeah.
And then Transformation Church was the first thing that I got introduced to by an ex-girlfriend. And, you know, her friends started watching it. She started watching it. She told me to start watching it. And I saw, Pastor Mike, who dressed, looked, sounded like me.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, cool. Let me dive back into this thing. And, you know, the messages that he had and the series that he did, him and Tim Ross, really, really changed the trajectory of my faith. I felt like, okay, there's a resurgence of what it means to be a Christian. And now I want to see what this is. I want to get involved with this. So, you know, God was meeting me at my needs, and he was providing me with people who were, you know, trying to figure out their spiritual walk as well. So during COVID, you have a ton of people who are trying to figure it out, and that kind of built community around the world. You know, everybody was trying to, that coupled with technology like this, where we're able to do a podcast, you know, is that we were able to watch these sermons together and comment with each other and, you know, talk with each other. And when Pastor Mike said that, you know, they have something called belong groups, you know, I remember back in middle school when I was a part of a small group at my church where I was like, oh, okay, like I know what that is. I can do that again. Of course, that's where I find it. You know what I mean? It's like I was so far removed that I was like, oh, that's where I find that community.
Right.
And then I got, you know, paired up with Darian,
another member
for the group, and the rest is history. You know, that's how I met you guys. And ever since then, you know, Darian helped me with, because me and my ex, we ended up breaking up because, again, even though I was doing all of these things, I wasn't completely healed. And I had things from the past. We had been together for a long time. So I had things from the
Yeah.
past that were coming up, and, and I didn't know how to handle it, and I didn't know how to admit to it, and I didn't know how to be vulnerable, and all of these things. So that fell apart. And I don't want to say right on time, but my community was right on time for when this fell apart,
Right.
and they were there to help me through this and to remind me of what the Bible says about my identity and who I am in Christ. And so community, to answer your question, Wes, like community is everything, like we can't walk this life alone. We aren't supposed to. God never intended for that to happen.
Right.
And everything that you see in this world that has been God created, there's not just one of them.
Right.
So God believes in producing fruit, and there will never be just one fruit. So everything multiplies, everything grows. As I'm starting to mature and realize these things, I'm like, oh, community is no different. That's what we need in order to live this life.
Well, community is what you make it, right?
Yeah, your community is what you make it, but also, like a lot of people, they build a community around their trauma, and that could be like the same thing as what you're saying. Like community is what you make it. It's like, hey, this is what I got. These are the people that are also hurting. These are the people that are around me. So I'm going to make this community. The community that I'm talking about is community that isn't going to let you stay where you are.
Yeah, definitely.
Like that's the community that's needed.
Yeah, I'm definitely referring to the community that you find that's a good place to be in, where you're getting positive feedback. But you have to be part of that community as well, pouring in and not just being poured into.
Yes.
Because if you're in a room full of good people that are not pouring into each other, it's not going to work.
Yeah, and beyond biblical, context, that's just a universal principle. You have to give in order to receive.
Yeah, that is universal.
That's how God created this world and this universe. Like it was created under that principle being it's a fact. Like if you give into this world, whatever you give, there will be an output. Whatever the input is, there will be an output, and that output could come back to you. So with that known, you are now responsible for how you apply that. And if you give back to a good community, the community is going to give back good to you. And if you go and you just take, that's going to run out. And when it runs out, you can't do anything but really blame yourself. But also the grace that's within that is that if it does run out, guess what you just have to do? You just have to give.
Yeah.
And once you give, it'll replenish.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So Key, with all your experiences that are taking place, and I know you haven't touched on what you're currently at right now, but before you do so, you have a choice between these two questions. What would you tell your younger self, or would you do something differently? Which one of those questions would you respond to?
Ooh. I would probably do something differently.
Oh, yeah?
Because even if I told my younger self, you only know what you know at that time.
Yeah.
Even if I told my younger self something, my younger self wasn't mature enough to hear from me, So they probably would, maybe like there's a chance of making the decision, but if I could do something different, there's a guarantee that I can make a different decision.
Well, what would you do differently?
Man, what would I do differently? I've thought about different points in my life of where I think like, cause I watch I'm into superheroes and powers and stuff like that. And, I watch shows like Heroes or, all these different shows where there's time travel. I mean, Back to the Future is my favorite saga of all time. That trilogy is fantastic. And so I always think back, what would be the points that I would go back and change something? And I think as far as morally and spiritually and emotionally, what I would change is I would go back to high school. Maybe about I would probably say like 11th or 12th grade. And I'd actually go back to the time where I lost my virginity. And I wouldn't do it. And I wouldn't do it because I think back to that choice in that moment, and I remember how I felt before and how I felt afterwards. And when I felt afterwards, I had so much shame because I wanted to save myself for marriage. And I didn't know why, mind you. Like, so it's not just like a self-righteous thing. I just knew that that's what you had to do. That was the good thing to do.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
But as I learned and as I matured as a Christian, there's protection in not doing that, right? So I feel like I eliminated my protection at that point. Like I exposed myself in a way to somebody who doesn't care about me at all.
Right.
And it's not her fault or anything like that. Like
she's another broken person like you are.
Another person that is probably thinking that I don't care about her at all. You know what I mean? Like, it's the same thing. And we were just, caught up in whatever. But I just remember afterwards, I had this thought that because I had already done it, it doesn't matter anymore. I could just, I keep doing it.
Pause right there. Pause right there. Pause right there. That statement right there is the thing that we're all living today.
Yep.
Whatever the affliction may be, once you've done it, you're like, well, I've already done it. I might as well just, do a couple more times this week, and then I'll stop next week. It's almost like the New Year's resolution all over again.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's why New Year's resolutions don't work. No. That's why even in recovery, like if you're recovering for something, they say, try not to count the days because you're keeping something of mind that you can make a decision on that could ruin something. Like you put too much pressure on it.
Yeah.
And, instead of me, if I knew God, truly knew his character at that time, I could have gone and repented for what I did and got put back on the right track,
Ain't that the truth?
and continue going. But I was, I didn't know God. I didn't know God's will. I knew that he saved me, but I didn't know about him well enough, to know that this is something that he could handle. And so I just was like, okay, let me just be the best worldly version of myself.
Exactly. That's a decision I think everyone comes to. As long as I'm doing good.
As long as I'm doing good. That's it. That's what I told myself. So from that point, girls, as long as as long as I'm not the asshole in a relationship, you know what I mean? Like as long as I'm not hurting her, doing anything like that, physically, domestic, anything like that, as long as I'm enriching her life, whether the relationship goes well or not, I felt like I was in the right, so I'm going out, I'm doing my thing. I'm not turning it off. I'm turning on all the charm, all the stuff, everything to just get the most out of my life.
Gosh, you're speaking my life. Be the best boyfriend you can be. Yeah. And that means that you're exempt from everything you've done.
Yes.
Oh, that was me. Oh my gosh.
That was it, bro. That's how I moved, and as long as I was the best version of me and the nicest version of me, I felt like I can get away with whatever I wanted. If I lied, there was a reason.
You've earned it.
You know what I mean? If I made a decision or did something that was selfish, well, it was because I did so much good. I deserve to be selfish in this regard, and with no communication, right? No. Just expecting whoever I'm interacting with to just know this about me.
Yeah.
And I use that as a safeguard and went through my life. So, I think everybody kind of reaches that point, but that would be the thing that I would do different, because I do believe that if I would have stayed the course, I would have discovered somebody that I really wanted to share that with. And I wouldn't feel this need to try and prove myself or
less trauma.
Yeah, really less trauma. I'm not saying that you will have a perfect life if you save yourself for marriage or anything like that, but I think that it would have severely chopped, I would probably say about 75 to 80% of the other things that have come from that decision.
That, my friend, is less trauma. Let me just jump on that one for a minute, because that is the fork in the road that a lot of people will look back at, like that's where things really started going downhill. When that moral compass gets swayed to literally the flesh, it's one of the hardest things to come back from. You hear in society every now and then people say stuff like, "Oh, I'm a virgin again because I've been, celibate."
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, my friend will be like, if you want to celibate, I can buy a bit, because at the end of the day, it's in you, and not to stop. It's something you can do, yes, but it's a rare thing for people to be able to do, because we tie that sexual gratification to a lot of things for us to feel good, even though it's temporary.
Yeah. Yeah. You're absolutely right. And even then, like, even for the people who are listening to this conversation, I don't want them to harp too much on the sexual act itself, but you alluded to it. It's when that moment that you go against your moral compass, your moral code, what you know is right and what you know is wrong, and you choose the wrong. Right. And so I didn't have enough, like, I really, really believed that I needed to wait until marriage. You know what I mean? Like, that was I didn't realize it at the time, but that was something that I really held on to, and I made a choice against it. For what? And once that happened, the trust in yourself starts to diminish.
Yeah. I mean, you hold on to it for whatever reason, you decide to hold on to it. And it's something you treasure for a bit, but the minute you let it go, the minute you talk yourself into why you hold on to it, I threw mine away at 19. I was in no rush, and I was dating girls, but I was in no rush. If it presented itself, it did. A few times it did, but then all the family members come home, whatever the case may be. But as soon as I threw it away, it was a ski trip downhill.
Yep. Absolutely.
It was,
absolutely.
Yeah, a lot of bad decisions after that.
I just think that people who are listening, like, if you, like, think about the thing that you care about the most, like the standard that you have, like the code that you have. And if I guarantee that if people have broken that code for themselves, they can identify where things went downhill. And the people who haven't, like, do not let that code get broken, whatever it is. You can't, because it's going to cause you to be out of character.
Very true. I mean, sexuality is a gift presented by God, and we treat it like a drug.
We do.
We
treat it so much like a drug.
Oh, big time.
So much. And it's because we don't have a balance anymore. Because we're living in this fallen world. There's an overwhelmingly amount of darkness that's around, and there's light that's around as well. But there is more darkness than there is light because of the fallen world that we are in. So, that's why, Jesus gives parables about the lamp and talks about, the lampstands and how they fell and how the stars fell and how, all of these things happen. And, like, it's a deeper meaning than people want to believe, but the light is really, that's what we're trying to bring back. That's what we're hoping will extinguish the darkness that's around. It's a tale as old as time.
Yeah, this is why the light has to be in each one of us, because the light is Jesus, and if we represent Him,
and you have to keep it lit.
You have to keep your lamp lit.
You have to keep it lit, because the thing is, we are because of the world that we're living. We're in 2024. About to go in 2025. We have technology, so we know that lights are. We've basically been smart enough to conduct light to be on all the time, right? We don't see the mechanism that can turn off or turn on a light. And so when the Bible was being written, and when God would, like, light was never supposed to be a constant thing in that way either. You know what I mean? So from a technology standpoint, so we are unable to really relate, because then when you read the Bible and you see that a lamp needs oil and that oil will run out, thus putting the lamp out, it's a hard concept for us to understand. Because we're like, well, we live in a world where we don't have to put oil in a lamp. I put batteries in there.
You don't have to do a lot of things.
I'll plug something in. Like, it's a constant electricity. In fact, I'm entitled to electricity. Electricity should be around. So then what happens is that you have a bunch of Christians that are running around thinking that their lamp is plugged into something that's just consistent. And that's not how it works. You have to continue to refill your lamp. You have to continue to refill it with oil. Now, what is oil? Oil is the word of testimony. The oil is the word, like we've talked about. That's how God uses the term oil, is around giving the word. So in order for us to continue to be a light, we need to have more of the word in us, and we have to refill it. And that's kind of the place that I'm in now as a believer, as I'm starting to mature. I'm like, oh, I can't just hear this once and say that I know it.
Exactly.
And that's what a lot of Christians run around as. They're just like, oh yeah, well, God saved me because it's past tense. I know that he did this. Yeah. But he's been asking us since the start of the New Testament, since Acts, what are you guys doing now? There is an ask to do something now.
It's still relevant, that question.
It's still relevant. And it's like, I know that he saved me, but he wants to be my Lord now. What does that require now? And that requires you to be filled up with this and to know it, because you're going to encounter situations that words in the Bible will be able to counteract, and you won't fall into it anymore. You won't lose your moral code like I did before. You'll be very confident in your identity. Bringing this all back full circle, you'll find out that your identity is in Christ. If anybody is dealing with an identity crisis, read the Bible. The Bible will tell you what your identity is. And there are specific verses that are there. I know that that's like blanket, so I want to be sensitive to the people who are like, oh, where do I even start or anything like that. But, start in Acts. If you know Jesus, but you don't know how to be a disciple, start in Acts. Read Acts, read that through, and then you'll know where to go from there. God will talk to you from there. If you don't know Jesus at all and you're hearing this, start off with Matthew. Start in the Gospels, get to know who Jesus is, and then read Acts.
We'll get to Acts sooner than later.
Yeah, exactly. Whatever you do, every Christian should be reading Acts. That's absolutely, it's crazy. All the information that's all of what you can perceive, there. Acts, Psalms, Proverbs. Those are your big three right there to just read from an understanding, wisdom, and knowledge and things like that. Right. Then you dive into the context of the historic, what the prophecies actually are, what is being prophesied here, what is being asked of me to do in this day and age, and how will I even be able to accomplish that with so much going up against me on a day-to-day basis, some of it that I've inflicted and some of it that the enemy has already set, to run its course.
So for those who start off with Revelations, that's a no-go.
Revelations, what I'm learning, where I'm at right now is that Revelations isn't as scary as a lot of people. I grew up in church where they weren't teaching Revelation like that. No one understood it. No one knew it. Right. And there's a reason for that, actually. There are prophecies that say that, this book will be sealed, that you won't understand it. And the reason why I believe that is because in Isaiah it talked about the Old Testament being sealed, and it wasn't open until Jesus came.
That's right.
And so, there are things, and that was an 800-year gap. So you have a bunch of people giving their own interpretation of what they think the book of the law is saying, what Moses said, and what Abraham was saying. And then they were taken aback when the reality was really fulfilled, because it wasn't what they thought it was going to be.
Right.
And so it's the same thing with Revelation, is that a lot of people were saying, I don't know what this is going to be. Oh, the mark of the beast, 666. Right. It's Microsoft. It's Monster Energy. Oh, it's Donald Trump. Oh, it's, some Antichrist, all this stuff. And we're in the same position as we were during that time.
That's right. Yeah. We haven't changed ourselves by going to God in any way, shape, or form, instead of reading the boogeyman stories.
Exactly. Or reading the boogeyman stories. And actually, when you read Revelation is the if you want to know about Revelation, read Revelation 1, chapter 1, verse 1. Revelation chapter 1, verse 1. Maybe Revelation chapter 1, verse 1 to 3. And that is pretty much the summary and conclusion of Revelation. Actually, in fact, it's Revelation chapter 1, verse 1 through 8.
Okay.
That is the summary and conclusion of Revelation. So Revelation is not scary. It's just saying, hey, here's the battle. Here's the war that's going to happen. Here's what's required to happen. And here's what's going to happen. And then we're moving to a new heaven and a new earth. And as we're reading that now, I believe that we are getting to a point where more and more people are going to start to understand what Revelation is saying. And what that means is that Revelation is fulfilling. And what that means is that heaven is coming soon, you know?
Yeah.
And as this resurgence of Christianity and faith is coming up, I think simultaneously people are starting to I think God is going to start reigning again, where he's giving his word, his yeast out to people to start to understand what Revelation is saying. And that's going to be a crazy time because, just like in Jesus's time, there were a lot of persecution from Christians, from teachers of the law, from the Pharisees, from the Sadducees. They weren't Christians at that time, but, the teachers of the law, the people that upheld the law. And I think back sometimes I'm just like, man, what kind of believer would I be if I was around in that time?
And you're threatening death for just even speaking.
Good question, man. Good question.
And I just saw like Jesus, he just preached, the Sermon on the Mount, 5,000 people that are there, this whole stuff. Would I believe it? Because at that time, I've grown up in the church with the teachers of the law, and this is what it was, and this is what, and then I see this guy from Nazareth, with his disciples telling me spiritually and figurative and parabolic, I don't know if that's a word, but, these things that are really, they're the same, but they're different from what I've learned.
From the teachings that you knew before. Yeah.
Or even if I wasn't in there at that time, because, Jesus only traveled throughout Judea and a few other places. And, you have historians that think that he traveled out, farther out, different things like that. It doesn't really matter. But there was somebody in Australia who didn't know that the Messiah came and went.
Right. That's right.
You know what I mean? And they're just living their life regular. So, it makes you think about this kind of stuff. And it's like, wow, if Jesus came back right now, would it be a spectacle?
Oh, there'd be so many people proving that he's not.
Would it
They'd
be
be doing exactly what they did before.
When he came back, I mean, is as much as we read Revelations and they're just like, oh, his eyes of fire and he's coming down on clouds and all of these things, have we known God's character to be a spectacle?
Right. Yeah. He doesn't put on the show.
That's not necessarily how we know. We know him for not being that more than we know him for being that.
Exactly.
Right. You have your stories. You have a part of the Red Sea. You have the flood. All of these things that he did because people's faith back then required it.
Yes.
People's faith today, they don't necessarily require that. And I would argue that he's moved more abundantly, subtly, than he has with a big spectacle. So then it makes me think, I'm like, well, if he came back, you think he would alert everybody? I don't know.
I'm just hoping he alerts me. I don't know about the rest of y'all.
Yeah, I want to be alerted. I want to know, but I don't know if everybody's going to know.
I'm hoping that day the WhatsApp call works when I call the group.
Yeah. He hits us up on the cell phone. I always, I have a big imagination. So, I grew up thinking oh man, the clouds are going to part and the trumpets are going to sing and all this stuff. But, it talks about in the Bible, it says, a trumpet is like a person who speaks the word.
Yeah. Yeah.
So then now I'm at a place where I'm like, okay, well, is it a trumpet the way I know a trumpet is, or is it a trumpet the way that God said a trumpet is?
Yeah.
That's the difference,
to trumpet something is a verb, so.
there you go. So, and it talks about singing a new song and how, like, so like all of these things are being related, and I'm starting to understand a little bit more, or at least just give the option to not box my God in, because I'm like, is he going to come the way I think it is? Like, no, he might not, which is why it's so important to know the word. And I feel like that if you know the word, and if you're in it and you know these verses and you have it tattooed on your heart, just like he said that we should,
right,
then however he comes back, because he's transfigured, that's in the Bible. He has a new body. We don't know what it looks like. We don't know if it's physical. We don't know any of these things. But the only manual that we have is that book right there. Yeah. So where I'm at in my spiritual walk is my objective is to know that book the best way that I can. And my belief is from knowing that book, I'll be directed to the next thing that I have to do.
There you go.
Yeah.
Beautifully said, Keith. Beautifully said. Oh man, this is beautiful. This is good. This is good. This is good. Well, I'm glad we don't have to pay for this because we'd be owing some money. So that's good.
No, you guys get the first two free. I'll come back. You get that one, but then after that, I'm gonna have to charge my brothers.
Stamp our card.
Stamp the virtual card, man. You get, after two, you get 2 free ones, and then you got to fill it back up.
If that be the case, I'd definitely pay. It was definitely worth it, man. This is definitely
good.
I know you're a busy man. I know you got a lot to do today. I know you got a few other bookings this afternoon, so we want to thank you for your time. Wes and I learned a lot. We got to chop it up a lot. And hopefully this won't be the only time you visit the Baptized and Clueless podcast, because, man, the groups that we're in collectively has got a lot of individuals that have a lot of experience. So we just want to be able to share it with our audience as much as we can.
Absolutely, man. I'm so happy that you guys are doing this. Just continue to be obedient to the things that God is calling you to do. And then also on top of that, man, just try things. Like, I'm like, even if you're just like, oh, I'm not sure if I should do, like, just try it and see where it goes, and I'm grateful because I've been baptized and I have been clueless. And I'm happy to be on this podcast to talk about it. I am in no way, shape, or form perfect or know it all. And I'm just walking it out like y'all, man. And it's a blessing to be able to walk it out with you guys. So thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Kira.
Thank you for tuning into Baptized and Clueless. We hope today's conversation has brought you encouragement on your spiritual journey.
If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, share, and leave us a review.
Join us next time. Until then, keep seeking, keep questioning, and know you're not alone. Thanks again.